Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Silver Years. My name is DK, and I'm very happy to be here. And I humbly thank you for joining me. Okay, today is a new segment of My Story Time. Now, My Story Time is where I tell stories from my life as I experience them. Stories that make up my story, not his story. Stories that are authentic and unique to me and my experiences. And these stories are a part of my legacy and the genetic imprints that I leave to my future generations, who, by the way, don't even really know about these stories because they just never came up. Overall, these stories probably only have meaning to me, but hopefully you'll find something useful in them as well. Or not, I'm going to tell them anyway, for the record. Now, today's story, the story that wants to be told today, is coming in from 1983, and it begins in Denver, Colorado. And as I start this, I'm gonna refer back to the last video I did, the line in the sand, because I talked about some of the things that happened in 1983. But I'm going to start out first. That 1983 was a massive year of change for me. And I seem to run in 9 year cycles because I realized that 9 years later, 1992 saw another massive change for me in the move to Montana, and I had a move in 1983 as well. But the year began with me cutting my hair. So my line in the sand video was about what led up to me cutting my hair. Change your hair, change your life. And definitely that's what happened. My life changed and everything changed. I changed my hair, and then I went and had my second child, and spent probably a couple weeks in the movie theater because there was a heat wave in Denver and it was so unbearable. I could not be in the house, so I'd take my little newborn and sit in the movie watching The Color Purple. And this is where my commentary several videos back about The Color Purple having come out in 1983 and not what they're publishing in 1985. It I spent more than a few times in the theater because it was a long movie. I could sit there for 3 hours and keep cool. So definitely calling out whatever kind of information they're putting out on that. But after I had my second child, I've got this haircut, I have a baby, and now my in laws, this is my first husband, my in laws decided that they wanted to open a restaurant. They opened a Mexican restaurant in Orange County, and they needed my husband, who was a contractor, to come and help build out this restaurant that they were intending to open as soon as they could finish it. It was my father in law's dream to have a Mexican restaurant because his family had a successful one in Torrance, and he always dreamed of having that for himself. So now they were able to do it, and my husband went out to start building out the space so that we could have a restaurant in this space. And it was initially set up that he would run the restaurant with his mother while my father-in-law went to work, because my father-in-law still had a job. He was a mechanical engineer and worked in aerospace, and he had a full-time job that basically gave him the financial security and comfort so that he could confidently open this restaurant. But my husband at the time and his mother were supposed to do the operation. They were supposed to be running this restaurant. So when they were ready, they came and got me and my oldest daughter and the baby. So the two kids and me were picked up, and we had to move out of our house in Littleton. Now, when they showed up to move us, we got a big U-Haul trailer, and my sister-in-law and her husband came, and my husband's cousin came. His name was Jess. Jess came to help as well because when they drove out, they came with this Cadillac. Okay, it was a 1975 Cadillac Eldorado, the biggest car you've ever seen. I drove this car. I can't tell you how many times. It was an adventure. driving this car. You don't see cars like this on the road anymore. This car was huge, and it was a V8, and it had power, and it was a two-door. It was beautiful, actually. It was pristine. But my father-in-law had prepped the car, got it all ready for this trip. So we were going to pull the trailer with this Cadillac. And when you're driving from Colorado to Southern California, you have to drive Interstate 70 or I 70. Now, I 70 goes east to west. And what it does when it leaves Denver, it goes through the pass. Okay, there's a huge pass, and then you have to go through the tunnel called the Eisenhower Tunnel, and it's almost 2 miles. This huge tunnel bored out through the top of this mountain, and you go and you drive into the tunnel, you drive out, and then you go out the other side, and all of the semis and delivery trucks, everybody's got to drive this pass, and it's a gnarly thing, especially if the weather isn't cooperative. In this case, we were at the back end of summer, so the weather, excuse me, was not an issue. And so we've got this Cadillac pulling this trailer behind. Now, my car, which was a Jeep, a CJ7, was being driven by my sister-in-law and her husband, and my husband was driving his truck with stuff as well. So I was in this Cadillac with his cousin Jess, who was driving. I was sitting in the front seat holding my infant. Now, this was before the days of child's chairs in the car. They've passed a lot of laws where you have to have baby seats and all these things. Well, that was not in effect in 1983. So I'm holding the baby, who's pretty new. I mean, she's only a few months old, and my oldest daughter, who was 7, was sitting in the back seat, huge back seat in the back of this Cadillac. And as we're making the climb up the pass to get to the tunnel, we're about halfway up. My daughter in the back seat asked if she could come sit in the front seat because she wanted to see everything while we drove through the tunnel. Oh, sure, honey, come on up. So in this huge bench seat, we had Jess driving, then my daughter, and then I'm sitting in the seat with the baby. So we're all 4 of us are in the front seat of this Cadillac driving up to the pass. We get into the tunnel, and Jess is driving. He's great. He was an EMT. He was really cautious and careful, and he was very responsible in this whole process. But as we were in the tunnel, now remember the elevation is high, way past timberline, in where this pass is, probably 11,000. I can't remember, 10, 11,000 feet. It's very high, and so as we were coming out of the tunnel, I'm holding the baby and I watch, and I don't know, for some reason I glanced down and Jess went to put his foot on the brake. Okay, put his foot on the brake to prepare the car for the other side, because we've got a heavy load and we've got to go down this steep grade going down on the other side, because what was going to happen is when we got to the bottom, that was called Frisco. That was the town. And there was a village in there, which was a pancake house, a popular pancake house in Colorado. And we were all going to meet at the Village Inn. Well, of course, my husband and my sister-in-law and her husband has zoomed all past us, and they were all down at the other side. They had all gone over through the tunnel, and they were down on the other side as we were climbing. So we get to where you could see light coming into the tunnel. I watched Jess put his foot on the brake, and his foot went all the way to the floor, which meant we had no brakes. And not a word was spoken. I have to say, you could have heard a pin drop. Jess never reacted. And I just sat there holding my baby. And my first thought was what I had learned years ago when the Native Americans would go into battle: today is a good day to die, because I really thought we were going to die. And so I sat there holding my baby and thinking, today is a good day to die because we're going over the edge on this. There's no no way out. That's really how it felt. But it was funny, I didn't panic, and Jess certainly didn't panic. And as we were coming through the tunnel, and anyone who may know it, I mean, it's hard to know unless you're there. You come out, and then the road goes out and it goes around and then it goes down. And they had a little bit of a cutaway here where the mountain blocked it, but there was like a little cutaway where service cars could park who needed to service the tunnels. So there was like a couple little an area where you could just park. And what Jess decided to do was turn into that. And I think he figured it was better crashing the car into the mountain that was there in the cutaway and stopping it that way versus trying to go down and go over the edge, because that happens. That happens. And what he did was turn into that cutout. And of course, there were a group of people there who were just jabbering, in the middle of it. And the two of us just started going, waving at people to get the hell out of the way because we were going to run them down. And they wouldn't move. They just kind of looked at us like, hey, what's up? What's your problem? You slow down. It's like, and we're waving, get out of the way. We were ready to hit the mountain. And they did. They moved out, and Jess managed to put his foot under the brake, pull the brake pedal back up. He hit the brake again, and it stopped us like this, far from the mountain. It stopped us. And in the car, of course, my daughter sitting in the middle is oblivious. Okay. But in the car, Jess and I simultaneously, it was just, and we just sat there. We just sat quietly for 5 minutes at least. We sat there, and it's like, okay, no words were spoken in any of this. Okay. What do we do now? Do we risk it? The brakes worked. We got out. So what are we going to do? Are we going to sit here? So the decision was made. We're gonna go. And Jess, we turned out. We went back into the highway, and of course we ran the shoulder, and went very, very slow. Ultimately, we did make it down to the Village Inn, and of course everybody who's there is halfway finished with their breakfast and going, "What took you so long? Where you been? It took you forever. What, blah, 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 blah." And Jess and I still at this point hadn't spoken a word to each other, to anybody. It was totally, oh my God, we hadn't spoken a word. Anyhow, um, it came out while we were sitting there that Jess thought we were going to go too. And Jess, I vocalized what my thoughts were. Today is a good day to die. Jess's thought was, oh, if the baby had only stayed in the back seat, she might have lived. He really thought we were going over too. Oh my God. That was probably, it wasn't the day to die, but it was a problem. So anyway, we found out later what the problem was. My father-in-law had drained the brake lines, and there was a bubble in the brake line. And at that altitude, the air bubble collapsed, and therefore the brake failed as a result. But when we got beyond the altitude, and when we never had a problem again. Okay, but it was a scary moment. And my children, of course, have no memory of it because they don't. But it was a bonding moment. And he and I never spoke about it again. It was just, that was it. He had his thoughts, I had my thoughts. We never really spoke about it. It was just exhale. And we were both very grateful that it worked out the way it did. I wouldn't be here today if it hadn't had worked out that way, because I really felt we were going over the edge, and it was a brush with uh, I don't know. It's like the move to Montana. Sometimes if you look at things and you look at where it's taking you, maybe it's a warning about where you're going and what you're what hot frying pan you're driving yourself into in the move, because that's really what happened. I ended up making this move, and it ended up being quite um, illuminating in a number of ways. And my mother-in-law had made it clear that my new baby, who she thought looked too much like her son, was not something she liked. I don't know. It was really a strange, and she ended up treating that child badly, and uh, I don't have words. I really don't. So I spent a lot of years trying to protect that child from a grandmother who rejected her at birth, and just because of how she looked, I don't know. Um, the child didn't do anything, and so the child, of course, responded that every time the grandmother held her or got near her, she would just scream and scream and scream, which was kind of funny, because that grandmother worshipped my oldest one, and that child could walk on water, and she would do anything for that child, and that child responded accordingly. And then the second one, who was rejected, just screamed and screamed when that grandmother was near her, and there was absolutely no attachment to that grandmother, and it was a direct result to of how she was treated, and the words that were spoken to her, and the other things that happened. But I suffice to say, I did the restaurant thing, and I'll probably do a whole other story time on what happened with the restaurant thing. I did ultimately move back. I told my husband, you can stay, but I'm leaving. He decided to come, but I said I'm not going to stay in this environment. After about a year, and then I went back and got my old job, and we moved back into our house, and then life went on to do whatever it needed to do. So, what can I say? That's my little blip from 1983, and that is just the beginning of what happened. Aside from the hair, and then the move, and the near death, and there you go. So, in conclusion, and for whatever it's worth, this is my little protest against history, his story. This is me telling my story my way, for the record. It's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I would love to hear your stories as well. So please feel free to share your stories in the comments. Until next time, be well, choose love, and thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.